Welcome to Follow Me to the MROP, a podcast dedicated to the journey of the masculine soul and the transformative power of initiation. My name is Brian Mueller. I live in suburban Dayton, Ohio, and I made my rites at Pilgrim Park in Illinois in 2014. I'm your host, and in each episode of our show, I'll sit down with one man who has made his rites, and I'll invite him to tell his story. This won't be an abstract explanation or a theological lecture, just a real conversation about what it was like to cross that threshold at the rites and what changed afterward. Before we begin, a quick word of gratitude. This podcast is brought to you by Choosing Presence. We believe that the greatest gift a man can give his community is his own presence. In a world of constant distraction, Choosing Presence provides the tools to help you stay grounded in the now. If you'd like an easy way to begin learning about the practice of presence, you can download the free Practicing Presence app at choosingpresence.org/app. Now, the Men's Rites of Passage, or MROP, is an experience designed to help men move from the first half of life into the second, shifting from a focus on ego and achievement to a life of meaning and soul. On this show, we just don't talk about the rites in theory, we talk to the men who have walked the path. Today, we are joined by a man who has made his rites, and we're going to hear exactly what that journey looked like for him. My guest today is Doug Shirley. Brother, I'm really glad you're here. Thanks for making the time and for being willing to share your story.
My pleasure.
Doug, tell us where you're from and how you spend your time these days.
Yeah, well, I am originally from the Philadelphia area, last 20-some years from the Seattle area. How I spend my time, working, playing, doing yoga, cooking. Probably cooking is my favorite. 3 boys, 18, 17, and 12, a wife of 23 years, couple jobs, an academic job, a counseling job. And then I spent a good bit of the time doing looming stuff. I'll be convening Awaken for 2026, like you did in 2025. I'll try to fill your big shoes.
You sure you got time for this conversation? Let's dive in. Let's talk about the MROP. The Men's Rites of Passage is a unique experience. It's not a retreat or a workshop. It's an initiation. Many men arrive at the rites at a crossroads in their lives, looking for something they can't quite name. Before we dive into the why and the how, let's start at the very beginning. Doug, where and when did you make your rites?
2016, Aravaipa Canyon in Arizona.
And who was the weaver? About how many men also were there?
Jim Taylor was there. Belden Lane was there. I think Belden was a ritual or a wisdom elder, not a weaver. Jim Taylor. How many guys? I don't know. It was a full crew. So that's usually 60, 70, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds about right. When you think back to that weekend, what's the very first image that comes forth for you?
Being freaked out. and I'll tell you why. Actually, when you ask it that way, the first image that comes is arriving in the airport, and finding out I was a doctoral student at the time. Finding out that my appeal to get more time on my dissertation had just been denied, and I was now given 3 weeks to finish the damn thing. And if I didn't finish it, not only would I not earn my degree, they'd kick me out for statute of limitations. So talk about the heat getting turned way up upon arrival.
Right. And then you were going to spend, 5 days in the desert, right? So
5 days where I'd be unplugged.
Yeah.
5 days I could be writing.
Yeah, that's a lot to come in with. So generally, though, speaking, how was that whole entire experience like for you? Thinking back to the whole event.
Brian, I had no categories for what was to come. And it's kind of cool, these questions you're asking, because like the first word that comes is sensual. It was so sensory oriented. And when I think about experiences of retreat or men's work or whatever we call it that I would have done prior, it would not have engaged the body. It would not have engaged the sensorium. Even like good food, like healthy food, like not just like lasagna. So that's the first thing that comes.
Yeah. Now, without divulging anything that might be confidential or too personal, was there a singular experience that you had during the rites, or maybe an encounter with another man that really stands out to you?
Yeah, there were 2. One was in a ritual. And what's interesting is probably at the time, people talk about ritual and sort of like looking around and seeing that other people are having experiences that they wish to have and feeling like an impostor and all that sort of thing. What I would say is, like, I was having one of those times. So like in the moments that brought transformation, it wasn't like I was like, oh good, here's my transformation. I was like, how come those jerks over there get a better experience than I have? And so it was actually only in being able to look back and start to really sort of cook in what had happened, let it cook in me. Did some therapy afterwards and things like this to really kind of flesh out and live into. So that would be one. Just I speak often of a time in a ritual. Another is went with a dear friend who kicked my tail end a bit. You heard me say I was already kind of wound up thinking, oh my gosh, 3 weeks, major deadline. How am I going to do this? 5 days out in the desert. This is a waste of time. And so I was a couple days into the thing. I was ready to sort of like call it quits. It's like, okay, that's good. I had some good experience already, ate some good food. I should probably pace myself now, start to kind of like pull back a little bit. Sitting by a river, Jeffrey Batstone, who I know you've interviewed for this podcast,
Yeah.
was like, don't do it. There's enough. And really encouraged me to move back in. And actually, the time that I just described to you happened after that. So maybe had Jeffrey not kicked my pants a little bit, I may not have been as open as I was. Well, I don't know if I was open, but I was opening.
No, I mean, it's very, I appreciate what you're saying. It's a lot of the stories, especially in retrospect, you can sugarcoat things. You can say, wow, that was an amazing transformative experience. But, I don't like to underestimate or underemphasize the fact that this is work. You're doing real work there.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
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 And
And if I'm sorry, therapist by trade. I was talking about transformation with the client last night. And oh gosh, what was her word? Sucks ass. Transformation sucks ass was her phrase. And I said, yeah, it usually does. Right. So like in the moment, it's not often full of pleasantry.
right.
You may have a sense that something's stirring,
Right.
but oftentimes longing and lament and such are actually what's most felt in the moment.
Yeah, I don't talk about my rights experience too much on these podcasts because I really want yours to come through. But I remember the feeling when my rights was over, like, wow, I survived that. I'm never coming back.
For sure. Why would I do that again? For sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's such a challenge. So thinking back to your decision to go to the rights, how did your family or friends, your community respond to your decision to go?
Mm, that's interesting. I thought you were going to ask, how did they contribute to my decision to go? How did they respond to my decision? Well, a mixed bag. My wife was hugely supportive, but I don't really think she probably had a lot of hope. So it's not like she was like, oh, great, I'm going to get a new husband out of this deal. Ned Abendroth and I just did a podcast for Illumin the Cave. It's the cave in the
Gave it the fire.
Thank you. Yeah. Where we tell the story of Ned really being instrumental in inviting me to come. And so Ned and Paul Stanky and Jeff Batstone, those friends, I would not have come had they not just not just invited, but really nudged. And so I think, as is true probably of most of my healing and transformation, my decisions were really informed by others.
Yeah. So were there circumstances in your life, was there something going on in your life at that particular time? Obviously, you had men that you were close to nudging you along in this, but was there something else, that was going on that said, yeah, this is the time to do this?
I, I mean, I would say it's probably disturbed enough
Mm,
and probably dry enough,
yeah.
right? So, dryness let's say maybe spiritual dryness comes in lots of forms, including like life being half decent. Well, you know what I mean? And life sort of like halfway working.
Right.
But maybe not unlike that thing I was describing ritual. Jung said the psyche doesn't know the difference between ritual space and real space, right? So like what I was describing in ritual space of like thinking others were having an experience that was maybe better than mine, I would say that was probably going on in my real life too, right? Like things were progressing, and sure, I was up against a wall, a deadline, but things were progressing, and yet, the marrow of life maybe seemed like it wasn't quite getting to me.
Yeah. Yeah. This just occurred to me though, because I haven't asked this question before, but you have 3 sons. Did they affect your decision to go in any way?
Oh man, I love that question. Let's see. So 2016 would have been 10 years ago. So they would have been 8, 7, and a glint in my eye. God, I want to say yes.
Mm,
I mean, if they don't affect most everything, man, gosh. Whew.
yeah. I feel this.
Question, Brian.
Yeah.
Oh God, if they don't affect most everything I do, then that's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. So, when you arrived at the rites, you kind of said that, you had this sort of, visceral reaction upon arriving, but was there something you were hoping for or you wanted to be initiated into?
Oh man, that's good questions. Um, I mean, if I'm honest with you, Brian, my ego would have been intact enough at the time that I would have wanted something really flashy.
Yeah.
If I look back now with maybe a wisdom or a deeper sense of brokenheartedness or something, I could say I would have wanted to be getting back to myself, but I wouldn't have known that at the time. I would have been looking for something flashy. I remember in one of the early rituals, kind of like being the first to volunteer, so that I could do the big flashy thing and everybody could see it.
Right, right. Yeah. But was there anything though, conversely, that you were really fearing when you arrived at?
Oh, I mean, the same thing I just said. So back to ego intact. I was afraid of getting messed up.
Mhm.
And even like again, like even the like feeling the disruption of the first couple of days, and then be like, okay, that's enough. There. Let's pack that in. I was afraid of getting dismantled.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, obliterated, right? The ego fears obliterations.
Yes, I was fairly protected behind that bugger.
So so the right says it's a long experience. It's parts of 5 days. You're there for 4 nights. And of course, Aravaipa is just a beautiful natural location, and it has that unique feature too, where a lot of the men at those rites get to sleep outside, outdoors.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is such a wonderful experience. But sooner or later, and one of the other features is it's somewhat remote, so a lot of guys carpool into the rites, whether they're coming from the airport or elsewhere. I usually like to ask, how did you feel when you left the rites? Thinking a lot about my own experience where I was able to drive off alone. I know that wasn't the experience for you. You probably left in a van full of guys that were heading back to the airport or whatever. But how did you feel in the immediate aftermath, whether that's an hour or two later?
Yeah, I knew something had just happened.
Mhm.
I knew something significant had just happened. And so I remember I mean, you described it well. I think I was literally like in the back right corner of the minivan with my ass stuck to like three other guys. Um, but no, I remember having had a sense of like something significant has just happened. And, you've already heard me say I was already feeling the angst of what I had to go back to. Right. So probably some mix of like wanting to come back and tell my wife something just happened.
Yeah.
And then also, I have this big thing to do.
Yeah, you really had to jump right back in it with your doctoral thesis and all that sort of thing. So it probably, I like to tell guys if they have if they have this, it really does feel like a luxury, but give yourself some space both before entering the rites and then.
Oh, it's wise. It's wise.
Yeah. So how did the conversations with your wife and others change afterwards? I mean, what did you tell them?
Yeah, I remember just like crying a whole lot. Like trying to tell. I mean, it's kind of like how you're saying of like, trying to like not like spill the beans of like, hey, here's everything we did, but trying to sort of give enough of a frame for like, here are some of the experiences that we had, but then also trying to capture by words and in a different space, like what was otherworldly, right? Like I think, I mean, you asked the question of like, how did my boys inform? My youngest is Eli, and so let's say, metaphysically, Eli existed out there in the universe. He just didn't have bodily form yet. But I had a sense that otherworldly stuff was happening in and around me. And man, you just like putting that into words is pretty darn hard.
Yeah, no, it really is. So what has changed in your life since making the rites? Maybe practically, relationally, even spiritually speaking?
It's fun, Brian. I haven't heard any of these podcasts you've done yet, so I didn't have any kind of idea of the questions you'd ask. So it's fun to be in your questions right now and even hear what I'm saying. Like I am so much more otherworldly than I was. I mean, just even to follow my own lead,
Yeah.
I am so much more informed by something deeper than myself. In my teaching, in my counseling, often I now refer to myself as a bit more woo-woo, right? Like making metaphysical connections that really requires some faith and belief. It really requires some sense of like, no, there is more here than we might be inclined to see or to say.
What's interesting to me is that your rites took place sort of at the same time as sort of the culmination of your academic achievement. Sort of that capstone that you would have towards your next step in your career. I mean, at that time, still you were probably young as a counselor in the work that you're doing. It's interesting that would come at that point. Without a doubt, it influenced. Well, the one influence.
Well, very heady work, right? Like, a dissertation is all about like finding out what all the literature says in a particular area, quote unquote, becoming expert to that area.
Right.
Right. And so such left-brained activity. Right. And then we were invited to come in. I mean, you hear me say it was the sensorium. It was the sensuality of the time. That's not very left brain. And that's part of what can be kind of freaky, is being invited into an experience where logic isn't necessarily the thing that's going to hold you.
Right. Lots to think about there. One of the questions I like to ask is, though, how has the rites and maybe your journey since the rites affected your understanding of masculinity, initiation, and even the male journey?
As we're prepping for Awaken 2026, or if you listen to the podcast between Ned and me, I am really loath to engage sort of approaches to masculinity that singularize it, or that say like, it's a thing that it's a monolith, right? Like you being your sacred masculine self, Brian, and me being my sacred masculine self are the same thing. They just aren't, right? And in fact, the sacred masculine lives between you and me as we engage in this conversation much more than in either one of us. And so that to me, as I age and see and feel how much I need people, and need brothers like you, that's where I would say that the heartbeat, the drumbeat of the masculine comes through in those spaces between us as we take up residence in our own particularities. I think that it's much more of that than like, here's the 4 attributes that if you take on, you and me will pass the test.
Wow. As you're talking, even as I asked the question, what came to my mind is there's a podcast by a man named Ian McKenzie called The Mythic Masculine. Yeah. And Ian's not part of Lumen that I know of. I first listened to the podcast because Ned Abendroth was on his show talking about the elder rites of passage. But he recently did a 2 or 3 part series where he talks to a panel of trans men.
I saw the title of the podcast and wanted to see it. So tell me about it. Yeah.
I was just amazed listening to these trans men talk about their journeys, and they were probably anywhere from their 50s to their maybe early 30s in age. And when I came away, I still have not given as much thought to what it means to be a man as each of these panelists have.
Yes, they had to. I mean, they had to. I didn't watch it, but I can only imagine they had to.
Yeah, it blew me away in a way that I wasn't prepared for, because I thought to myself, I have not really even thought about this personally to the extent that they have, and that there might be a lot of room for growth there. And so it really has given me pause. It just tells me that the complexity of these questions is much more than maybe I realize.
Well, and like you and I, if we would be considered cisgendered, meaning like we would fit, we would feel like our identities kind of fit in the bodies that we're born into. There's sort of a givenness that comes with like, oh, you're a man. Oh, you're a white man, right? And so some of actually what we've got to unpack is that givenness, because it's not like the givenness is true.
Yeah.
Right? It's just been handed down.
Yeah. Yeah, it has. Yeah, it's taken for granted on some level. But there's something to it, after being involved with this work for now 12 years or so, and you may be doing this year too. I'm going to be at our rites of passage in Illinois in August. I'm really excited to be at that experience because it's a ritual transformative event. I know that will happen there for many of the men who are in attendance, but I'm not even sure on some level what it means to be a man,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that's the good news, right? Like your uncertainty there and your willingness to seek means that you're not foreclosing.
Yeah.
Means that you're not just simply going with the givenness that you were handed.
Right. Right. And, people, I told you I was talking to a man yesterday about his experience, and he had participated in some Father Richard Rohr retreats before the rites of passage. And then 30 plus years later, he did a rites of passage, and he talked about the evolution. He mentioned the evolution, obviously, in the rites. And I hadn't thought much about that because I think probably in framework, it's still very similar to what Richard was offering in 1996, but it is evolving. This whole experience is evolving. And, the rites that you and I went through more than 10 years ago is not the same experience that
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's good news, right? Context really matters. That's good news.
That is good news. I appreciate you taking some time to kind of explore these things with me. I do want to ask though, if a man came to you and said, I'm not sure about the rights. This is new to me. Should I participate in the rights? Do you have any advice for that man?
Well, it's kind of like the uncertainty that I just supported or wanted to support in you saying, I don't know what it means. Like if a man were to come and say, I'm uncertain, I'd say, oh, good. don't rush headlong into the thing, right? Like actually your trepidation or your ambivalence or your uncertainty or your anxiety. Oh, good.
Yeah.
That actually would be not so much like the thing to listen to by way of like, oh, okay, say no. And maybe they do need to say no, but actually that they're taking it seriously enough to question or to feel uncertain. Man, that I'd say bring all of that with you if you go, when you go. Don't leave the uncertainty or the question or the doubt or the insecurity, whatever it is. Don't leave it behind. Actually, that you're feeling it, that probably is good information.
Yeah, that's really sound. The one of the things I want to ask you, is there anything that should be said about the rights that we Illumin currently don't say about the rights? That seems like a big question.
Man.
You know what guys have said to me, just maybe as a point of reference, is that they're reassuring. They're very reassuring. When I ask this question to other men, I don't ask this exact same question to other men, but I ask them what counsel or advice they would give a man. There's a lot of reassurance.
Oh, that's helpful. That's a helpful way. I lost my mind in your first question, but the thing that I would say is it is really unusual to be so supported, right? So like even how you've heard me speaking of like being freaked out and this sort of thing, it is really unusual to go to a place where you will experience so much support, where men will love and support each other or challenge each other.
Right.
But love and support each other. I think that's probably said to some degree, but I don't know that even so, I don't know that I expected it when I went in. I think I probably expected critique, judgment, puffed up chests, all that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, let me change the topic a little bit if I can. And since you are convening the Awaken team this year, and that's coming up in November. So I always mention it at the end of the podcast too, but we're at November 6th through the 8th, the Awaken is happening, and you can find that at lumen.org/awaken. It's going to be in Santa Fe. Let me invite you to talk a little bit about that experience this year from, where you're at this point with the team.
Yeah. Well, when you and I were doing our work last year around the sacred fire, the sacred masculine, we're staying there. We're staying with that charge of engaging the sacred masculine. How we're going to do it, how we're going to keep doing it, let's say, is by emphasizing the lived experience of the stories that bring us together. So in other words, like, it's not like if you and I were to go, we wouldn't read stories about masculinity that were outside of us or the sacredness of masculinity that was outside of us, but rather it would be you and me shoulder to shoulder. How do we live and discover the sacred masculine that exists between us? So we're going to try to capture something that's really hard to capture, which is the we. So it's going to be less about like a thing, less about a construct, less about sacred masculine that exists outside. It's going to be much more about how do we live it? How have we been living it? How will we live it when we leave? So it's something about capturing the living, the being much more than the doing. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to do it, but that is our work.
That sounds wonderful, just from the sheer fact that, the ability to come and be present and be in that moment, and, how that will saturate the senses and, create a sense.
And find and discover, right? This word discovering that's in our title, that's it. We're going to come to be open to discovering together.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. And let me also offer, do you want to plug, you're going to be on the podcast, The Cave in the Fire with Ned Abendroth. What's that going to be about?
Hopefully, if folks listen to that, they'll hear some overlap to this.
Oh, great.
So it really was about Awaken 2026, but we talk. So one of the phrases that you'll hear Ned use is that masculinity flowers in every man differently. And what we talk about is the importance of the collective of masculinity, again, as opposed to the sort of monolith or singularity of masculinity, that it is in coming together in all of our fullness and all of our particularities and all of our community that the rhythms of the sacred masculine come forth.
Brother, I want to thank you. I want to say I love you. I really appreciate
I love you, brother.
Yeah, it is so good to see you spend some time at you hearing about your experience at the MROP and talking about some of this stuff in more depth has been really great. Thank you.
You're welcome, Brian. Thanks for doing this.
For those listening who are now feeling a tug in their own soul and are curious to learn more, allow me to share a bit about the history of these rites. The Men's Rites of Passage was originally developed by Father Richard Rohr and was first offered at Ghost Ranch, New Mexico in 1996. While it was supported for many years by the Center for Action and Contemplation, since 2012, Illumin has been the steward of this work, preserving and adapting the rites for men all over the world. To learn more about the history and the theology behind this work, I highly recommend reading Adam's Return by Richard Rohr. If you are ready to make your rites, there are 4 opportunities in the United States and another in the United Kingdom in 2026. The first is in Northern California, May 13th through the 17th. The second in the United Kingdom, July 22nd through the 26th. And in Illinois, August 12th through the 16th. There's one on the East Coast in New Jersey, September 16th through the 20th. And the final one of the year is in Texas, which is in MROP and Umbrales, our Spanish language rites, September 30th through October 4th. You can find details and registration information at illumin.org/MROP or illumin.org/events. Additionally, mark your calendars for Awaken, the annual national gathering of Illumin, taking place November 5th through the 8th in New Mexico. You can find more at illumin.org/awaken. Finally, a special thank you to our sponsor, Choosing Presence. If today's conversation moved you, I encourage you to bring more intentionality into your daily life. Download the Practicing Presence app for free at choosingpresence.org/app. It's a simple but profound way to stay connected to the journey we've discussed today. Thank you for listening to Follow Me to the MROP. Until next time, brothers, stay present.